Gears now, a local dispensary is teaming up with local legal clinics to help expunge the records of people who were affected by nonviolent drug offenses. Western Mass News reporter Glenn Kittle has the story.
Six Bricks Cannabis Dispensary and local lawyers held their first annual expungement clinic. Head of community responsibility with Six Bricks Dispensary, Arian Stewart, tells Western Mass News the goal is to help those with nonviolent drug offenses have those charges removed from their record.
We wanted to do this just because of the war on drugs and how people have been, black and brown folks have also been disproportionately impacted with the war on drugs. But this clinic is open to everyone today who wants to be able to talk to an attorney about a nonviolent drug offense.
Senior supervising attorney with community legal aid, Alyssa Golden, tells Western Mass News, with marijuana now legal in the Bay State, those who were charged with marijuana-related crimes before its legalization find themselves not being able to get a job or an apartment.
What we see sometimes is that people will be qualified for a job and they'll be turned down because of something on their record, or they'll get hired initially and then they'll be told that actually they can't move forward with employment because of something that shows up on their record.
Stewart adds, as a cannabis dispensary, they feel a responsibility to do everything they can to help people get their record expunged for a now legal product and give back to the community that is now supporting them.
We're acknowledging the fact that people have went to jail and have had served time for something that is now legal, that people are able to profit off of, who wanted to be able to give back to the community and really just do that like sustainable work.
Reporting in Springfield, Glenn Kittle, Western Mass News.